black boy is unjustly humiliated by the police, but they didn't know who his father was. In a small southern town where everyone knows everyone, a young black boy's dream is shattered in an instant by two overzealous police officers. But little did they know, their actions would set off a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of their community. What happened next shocked everyone, and the aftermath would change lives forever. Before we dive into this gripping tale, leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Noah Thompson's sneakers squeaked against the polished gym floor as he sank another perfect three-pointer. The echo of the bouncing ball reverberated through the empty high school gymnasium, a testament to the late hour and Noah's dedication. At 17, basketball wasn't just a hobby for Noah. It was his ticket to a brighter future. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, Noah glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:30 p.m. He'd lost track of time again, but he couldn't help himself. With college scouts coming to the next game, every extra practice minute counted. Gathering his belongings, Noah headed for the exit, his mind already racing with dreams of scholarships and a life beyond the confines of their small town. The cool night air hit Noah's face as he stepped outside, a welcome relief after hours in the stuffy gym. The streets were quiet, most of the town already tucked away in their beds. Streetlights cast long shadows as Noah began his walk home, his basketball tucked securely under one arm. But as Noah turned onto Maple Street, the silence of the night was broken by the sudden blare of a police siren. Red and blue lights flooded the darkness, and Noah's heart skipped a beat. He'd done nothing wrong, but years of cautionary tales from his parents echoed in his mind. Two officers emerged from the patrol car, their faces stern and unyielding. "Hold it right there, son," the taller of the two called out, his hand resting ominously on his holster. "What are you doing out so late?" Noah's throat went dry, but he managed to keep his voice steady. "I was just heading home, sir. I had late basketball practice." The officers exchanged a skeptical glance. "That's ID," the shorter one demanded, holding out his hand expectantly. As Noah reached for his wallet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a routine stop. The air crackled with tension, and something in the officer's eyes made Noah's stomach churn with unease. Little did he know, this encounter would set in motion a series of events that would rock their small town to its core. "Basketball practice, huh?" The taller officer, whose name tagged Red Miller, sneered. "Funny, I didn't know breaking into cars was part of basketball training." Noah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Breaking into what?" "No, sir. I swear I was just at the school gym. You can call Coach Johnson if you don't believe me." Officer Reed, the shorter one, circled around Noah. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. A young man matching your description was seen trying car doors." Noah's heart raced. He knew he'd done nothing wrong, but the accusation alone was terrifying. "Officers, please, there must be some mistake. I've never dashed." "Hands on the car." Officer Miller suddenly barked, cutting off Noah's protests. Now, confused and frightened, Noah complied, placing his palms flat on the hood of the patrol car. The cold metal beneath his hands seemed to mirror the icy fear spreading through his chest. As Officer Reed began to pat him down roughly, Noah caught sight of movement from the corner of his eye. A small crowd was beginning to gather, curious neighbors peering out of windows and stepping onto porches to watch the scene unfold. The shame of being publicly humiliated burned hot on Noah's cheeks. These were people he'd known his whole life. Teachers, friends, parents, the old lady who always gave out the best Halloween candy. And now they were watching him being treated like a common criminal. "Officer, please." Noah tried again, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm telling you the truth. I'm just trying to get home." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Officer Miller grabbed Noah's arms, wrenching them behind his back. The sharp click of handcuffs echoed in the quiet street. "Noah's dreams for months to come. You have the right to remain silent." Miller began reciting mechanically, but Noah could barely hear him over the rushing in his ears. A flicker of doubt crossed Officer Miller's face. He hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "Fine, one call. Make it quick." Noah, his heart pounding, quickly grabbed his phone and dialed his father's number, praying he'd pick up. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice came through the line. This decision would change everything, not just for Noah, but for their entire community. "Let's go home, son," Jonathan said softly, placing a comforting hand on Noah's shoulder. As they walked out of the station together, father and son both knew this was just the beginning of a much larger conversation, one their town, and perhaps the entire country, needed to have. The next morning, As the sun rose over the sleepy town, news of the previous night's events spread like wildfire. Whispers turned into heated discussions over breakfast tables and in line at the local coffee shop. The town, which had long prided itself on its tight-knit community and peaceful way of life, now found itself grappling with uncomfortable truths that many had chosen to ignore. Noah woke to the smell of his father's famous pancakes wafting up the stairs. As he made his way to the kitchen, he could hear his parents speaking in hushed, serious tones. They fell silent as he entered, both turning to him with concerned smiles. "Morning, son," Jonathan said, sliding a plate of steaming pancakes across the counter. "How are you feeling?" Noah shrugged, trying to appear unaffected, though a storm of emotions swirled inside him. "I'm okay, I guess. Just processing everything." His mother, Evelyn, wrapped him in a tight hug. "We're here for you, baby. Whatever you need." As they sat down to eat, the weight of their new reality began to settle in. Jonathan's phone buzzed incessantly with messages and missed calls. The local news station had already reached out for a statement. Outside, Noah noticed a small group of reporters gathered at the end of their driveway, cameras at the ready. "What happens now?" Noah asked, pushing his half-eaten pancakes around his plate. Jonathan sighed, rubbing his face. "Now, we face this head-on. There's going to be an investigation into what happened last night. It won't be easy, but it's necessary if we want things to change." Noah nodded slowly, a determined look settling over his face. "I want to help, Dad. I want to tell my story." Evelyn reached across the table, squeezing her son's hand. "Are you sure, honey? It could be tough, having everyone know what happened." "I'm sure," Noah replied, his voice steady. "If it helps prevent this from happening to someone else, then it's worth it." Jonathan felt a surge of pride for his son's courage. "All right then," Jonathan said. "We'll do this together." By afternoon, the Thompson family was at the center of a media storm. Jonathan's phone rang non-stop with calls from reporters, community leaders, and fellow law enforcement officers. Some offered support, while others demanded explanations or resignations. The family agreed to address the situation publicly, deciding on a press conference at the steps of the sheriff's office. As they arrived, Noah's stomach churned with nerves. The crowd was larger than expected. A sea of faces, some familiar, some not, all turned toward them expectantly. Cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions as they made their way to the podium. Jonathan stepped up first, his uniform sharp, his expression resolute. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "I stand before you today not just as your chief of police, but as a father, a member of this community, and a black man who has experienced firsthand the prejudices that still plague our society." He recounted the events of the previous night, his words painting a vivid picture of the injustice Noah had faced. As Jonathan spoke, Noah could see shock and dismay on many faces. Some nodded in grim understanding, while others looked away, uncomfortable with the harsh truth. "What happened to my son is not an isolated incident," Jonathan continued, his voice growing more impassioned. "It's a symptom of a larger problem, one we can no longer afford to ignore. As your chief of police, I have failed if even one member of our community feels unsafe or unfairly targeted because of the color of their skin." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jonathan pressed on, undeterred. "Effective immediately, Officers Miller and Reed have been suspended pending a full investigation. But this is just the first step. We will be implementing comprehensive bias training for all officers, reviewing our policies and procedures, and working closely with community leaders to rebuild the trust that's been broken." As Jonathan stepped back from the podium, he turned to Noah, giving him an encouraging nod. This was the moment they had discussed, the opportunity for Noah to share his story in his own words. Taking a deep breath, Noah approached the microphone. "My name is Noah, Journey of Hope and Change." Noah Thompson had always felt the weight of expectation on his shoulders. Growing up in a small town where his father, Jonathan Thompson, served as the chief of police, Noah was no stranger to pressure. But it wasn't until an incident that changed everything that Noah truly began to understand the power of resilience, change, and hope. It all started one cold evening when Noah, frustrated with his father's line of work and the challenges of living in a town where systemic inequalities seemed embedded in everyday life, confronted his father at the sheriff's office. A conversation that unfolded would change their lives forever. Noah had just returned from an altercation that left him feeling angry and defeated. Confrontation with law enforcement had left him questioning the very system his father upheld. As he stormed into the office, Jonathan Thompson was sitting at his desk, going over the day's reports. Noah, his voice raw with emotion, lashed out. "Dad, how can you stand by and watch this happen? How can you protect a system that's broken? It's not right." Noah's frustration was palpable. He had always admired his father, but this was different. The injustice he had seen firsthand had shaken him to his core. Jonathan, calm as ever, placed his papers down and looked his son in the eye. "I know this isn't easy, Noah. The system is flawed. That's why I'm here. It's not about being perfect. It's about doing what we can to fix it, one step at a time." Noah shook his head. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Dad. I'm tired of seeing people hurt, of seeing things never change." Jonathan stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Son, change doesn't come overnight, but it starts with people like you, people who care enough to speak up, to do the hard work. You have a chance to make a real difference, and I want you to remember that. No matter how hard it gets, you can be the change you want to see." Those words struck Noah deeply. He realized that his anger, though justified, could be channeled into something greater. Over the next few weeks, Noah focused his energy on basketball, a sport he had always loved. But now it became a symbol of his fight for justice. The game wasn't just a distraction. It was his way of proving to himself that he could rise above the challenges. Meanwhile, Jonathan too had a revelation. His years of service had opened his eyes to the flaws within the system. His deep sense of duty kept him working within it. He believed that change had to come from the inside, and he knew that his son's voice could be a powerful catalyst for that transformation. Noah's passion for change led him to Officer Jenkins, a figure within the community who shared his concerns. Together, they devised a plan to foster better relationships between the police and the youth in the town. The result was a basketball league that brought together kids from different backgrounds and law enforcement officers. The initiative was simple: play basketball and talk about the issues that mattered. At first, there were skeptics. Many people in the town believed that no amount of basketball could change the systemic issues plaguing their community. Noah, with his newfound determination, proved them wrong. The games became more than just competitions. They were a space for conversation, for understanding. Slowly but surely, the walls between the youth and law enforcement began to crumble. In the months that followed, Noah's efforts didn't go unnoticed. His dedication to improving the community caught the attention of local leaders and organizations. His work became a model for other towns to emulate, and soon he was being asked to speak at schools and forums about his experiences and the changes he was advocating for. It wasn't long before Noah was offered a scholarship to play basketball at a prestigious university, a stepping stone that could propel him to even greater heights. Noah's future was never just about basketball. As his senior year approached, he began to seriously consider his next steps. Several colleges had offered him full scholarships. It was a letter from Howard University that caught his eye. Law school at Howard, known for its commitment to civil rights and social justice, offered him a full ride. A dream come true for a young man whose heart had always been drawn to the fight for justice. One evening, as Noah sat with his parents, holding the acceptance letter from Howard, he knew this was the moment that would change everything. His father, who had always supported his decisions, looked at him with pride. "You've come a long way, son," Jonathan said. "Whatever you decide, I know you'll make a difference." Noah's eyes shone with determination. "I think this is it, Dad. This is where I'm meant to be." As Noah prepared to leave for Howard, his father, too, found himself at a crossroads. The changes Jonathan had implemented in the sheriff's office had brought both progress and resistance. Yet, his unwavering commitment to justice caught the attention of state officials, who offered him a position as state police commissioner. This role would allow Jonathan to expand his vision for community-oriented policing on a larger scale. Though leaving his small town was bittersweet, he knew the opportunity to create systemic change was worth the sacrifice. On Noah's last night at home, the community gathered in the high school gym for a farewell celebration. Friends, neighbors, and teammates all came to wish him well. Standing at the podium, Noah addressed the crowd with gratitude and hope. "A year ago," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "I was angry, lost, and uncertain about my place in this world. But this community reminded me of the power of resilience, unity, and hope. Change doesn't come easy. It starts with each of us deciding to make a difference." He looked at his father in the crowd, his voice steady as he continued. "I've learned so much from my family, from this town, and from all of you. Now, as I take my next step, I promise to carry those lessons with me." The gym erupted in applause, a standing ovation for the young man who had become a symbol of hope for the entire town. Afterward, as Noah walked through the crowd, exchanging hugs and goodbyes, he spotted Officer Jenkins near the back. The two shared a quiet moment of mutual respect, a reminder of how far they had come together. At night, back on their porch, Noah and Jonathan shared one last father and son conversation. The weight of the upcoming changes filled the air. So did excitement for the future. "You know, Dad," Noah said, his voice steady, "I've been thinking about what you always told me, about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Jonathan smiled, his pride evident. "And I see you doing just that, Noah. You're going to make a difference. I have no doubt." As the first light of dawn broke, the Thompson family loaded up their car, ready for the journey ahead. Driving through town one last time, Noah noticed signs in windows and bumper stickers with the words, "Be the change." It was a phrase he had shared in one of his speeches, now adopted by the community as a call to action. Jonathan glanced at his son. "Looks like your words have left a mark here, Noah." Noah nodded, a mix of pride and determination on his face. And this is just the beginning. As they reached the town limits, father and son both looked ahead with hope. Jonathan envisioned the reforms he would implement in his new role, while Noah dreamed of the cases he would fight in law school and beyond. They had different paths, shared the same goal, creating a more just and equitable world. Together, they had learned that change was not just a dream, it was a journey, built one step at a time, with hope as their guide.